Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by eBodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. Enjoy part 2 of my interview with bodyboarding legend Pat Caldwell.
Everything just went skyrocketed. So the Mach 7 was really the launching pad of the modern boogie board.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, when they came out in 82, as I recall, I went to that first pipe event and some guys had the Mach 7 and some didn't, particularly the international riders who hadn't, the Mach 7 hadn't been distributed in their countries yet. So they were coming over riding the super flexible, the red edge at the time. And the American guys were on Mach 7s, and the performance and speed was really, really obvious. The difference in performance and speed, I should say, between those two boards. So let's shift gears a little bit here, Pat. So you were going to UH, you were doing contests when you could, you were sponsored by Maury, and then at some point the PSAA tour started in Southern California in 1986. So is that when you chose to relocate to the West Coast so that you could do that tour? Was that why you relocated?
It was the main reason. That back in 86, I don't think I did any of the tour in 86 because I wasn't able to travel. I didn't have the money to even get on an airplane and go to those. I don't even remember how many events there were, probably 5 or 6 events or something like that. They were all in, I think all of them were in California.
Yeah. The first year. Yeah, I think so.
So in 87, I did pick up a couple more sponsors like Vital Signs and I think Oakley maybe, and a couple others. So I was able to that was the first year that I did the PSAA tour, and I think I did every event. And I think I finished 3rd behind Mike and Ben.
Okay. Now, what were salaries like in those days? Like Vital Signs was giving you $100 a month, $200 a month, something like that, or what?
Oh, I wish it was that much.
$50 a month.
Free clothes and stickers, baby.
Free clothes and stickers.
A meal when Gino picked me up at the airport.
That's great, man. The contracts back then, I moved out here in California in 87, and I think Maury was paying me like $125 a month, and I thought that was the best thing in the world, man. $125 a month. Woo! I'm a pro bodyboarder. So yeah, you moved to California. You were scraping, right? You were living in Ventura when you first moved out here?
Right. Yeah. I was living in Ventura and then Ojai.
Okay.
Before moving to Irvine in early 88.
Why did you pick Ventura? You knew somebody there who said, "Hey, come live with me"?
Yeah, it was Godfather Tony Prince.
Tony Prince.
And Joe
and Joe Gibbs?
Joe Evans.
Oh, Joe Evans. Got it. Okay. So you had a cheap place to lay your head at night.
Yeah, they were extremely generous.
And was JJ with you at that point?
She was, yes.
Yep.
We moved to California together in October of 87.
Okay. And I moved out here in May of 87. So yeah, we were, all doing that tour at that time. And eventually, yeah, you said you end up in Ojai and then you moved down here, right? And what year did you move down here? To San Clemente, I'm talking about, for those of you watching or listening.
Short stint in Irvine, and then I moved to San Clemente in, I want to say, early 1990.
Okay. I remember you had a condo down here. I went to your condo a few times.
Right.
Because I live not too far down the road from you.
Yes. We're by the park.
Yes. And so how did the tour go for you? The Bud Surf, well, it eventually became the Bud Surf Tour. And it was a great tour in my eyes. There was a number of events. They were all televised, which was fantastic for our profile, our sponsors, incentives that we would get from them. Did you enjoy doing those events? Sometimes the waves were horrible. Sometimes they were really good.
You know, I can't say that I'd say that it was fun and it was real, but it wasn't real fun. It was it it was a job, you know. I mean, at that time it was the criteria was not like it is today, and they were counting belly spinners like in the surfing where they were counting turns. They were counting
Yeah.
belly spinners, floppos, and the one who did the most spinners and floppos on a wave was getting through heats. So we unfortunately at that point we we bent to their criteria, and that of course changed after the PSAA was done and you know GOB started. But so I was finding the junkiest day at 40th Street in Newport, and when I was 1 foot in mushies, trying to get ready to go compete at Corpus Christi, you know, in a 95-degree jellyfish, 100 humidity.
Brown
So
water.
yeah, so I mean, it was fun. It was fun doing well, but it wasn't really what bodyboarding is all about. And
Yeah.
with that, you had judges who were only surfers, who had never grown up around the sport, who had never, they were learning as they were going. The only guy that really kind of took an effort and to learn the sport and what is good and what's instead of counting maneuvers was um I guess
Midget Smith.
Midget Smith. And he was my mentor. And we'll get into that when you talk about my judging career.
Yeah.
But Smith was instrumental in helping to at least differentiate between a good spinner and a bad spinner and a nice rollo, and you know, and kind of create a criteria that was in the beginning was extremely poor, to by the time that we ended up our last season competing as bogey boarders on the PSA tour, were you know, the cream of the crop, of course, was coming to the top just about every event. So
Yeah. So at that point, you know, the early years of the tour, maybe let's see, from 86. Well, 86, Keith Sasaki won the first year of the tour with his drop knee attack, because surfers love that, right? And I talked to Keith about that when I interviewed him. Then the criteria changed to what you said. It was like the most belly spins and floppos you could do, the better. The more you could do, the better. And eventually it became a situation where either Mike or Ben was winning literally every single event. Mostly Mike, to a lesser extent Ben. They were sort of an impenetrable wall of victory that none of us could crack. And there was some resentment over that from, I think, from a lot of us. I mean, legitimately, they deserve to win, I think, most of the events they did, but not all. I remember, I'll just go back one particular event in Florida that I remember that we were at. And Pat, I just remember you ripping in this heat in the final. You were getting barreled, yada, yada, yada. And Mike, I think, got an interference and still beat you. Because back then they counted like your best 4 waves or 5 waves or something crazy, like best 5,
that's
right?
5.
Yeah. So I remember you getting out of the water after the final. They didn't have computer scoring at that time, and thinking, oh, Pat got that in the bag. Not only did Mike get interference, but Pat was getting these long draining barrels in St. Augustine, I think it was. And then they announced you got like 3rd, and everybody was just like, what? And I remember you smashing your trophy in the parking lot. But
No,
yeah, I mean, was it okay? Go ahead.
I got second,
Second.
and it was close, and
Yeah.
you know, so yeah,
It was frustrating at that time, right?
I was extremely upset. I
Yeah.
have well, I've been as mad in a couple other events, like the '84 pipe event. I was pretty mad at that one. But that 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 contest at St. Augustine was like one of the kickers. Um, and we were on our way back to the airport in Jacksonville, and I don't do what I did, but I think they were beautiful trophies. And I think I threw it out the window from our moving rental car into the bushes. I was just like, I don't trophy and have to remember the just be.
Now Pat's in law enforcement now, so don't do this at home, kids.
No.
Oh my gosh, that's classic. So yeah, so it's a frustrating time. Those guys, some people would say, oh, they're getting juiced through heats, they're getting extra points and stuff like that. So, there were some times when competition was frustrating, and we all did that tour until it ended. Eventually, Maury sponsored it, eventually Easy Rider sponsored it, and then the whole thing fizzled out in the early 90s. And you had a stellar competitive career, but eventually the world tour was starting to come into the fray that you mentioned a minute ago, the GOB World Tour. Now, that was something we all dreamed of, right? Having a world tour for the sport. Let me ask you where you were in life at the point when the world tour began. The first event was in '94 in Viana do Castelo in Portugal. Were you at that event as a competitor, or were you kind of out of pro bodyboarding at that point?
I was still active in the sport. I was kind of jumping around sponsors. '94, I think I was sponsored by Tubes.
Yeah.
In '94, and but I had started lifeguarding in '93 in the summer because I had gone completely flat broke from the recession, the world recession that happened in '92.
Yep.
All of a sudden, my sponsors didn't pay me a dime, and I had a mortgage to pay, so I had to get a job. So
Yep.
I loved lifeguarding, and so I started lifeguarding in '93, and just went head over heels into it. I think I still competed at Pipeline in '94 and '95, and then '96 was my last year competing at Pipeline. But yeah, I didn't jump on the world tour thing because my Wave Rebel kind of went down with the recession.
Yep.
Hung on to some other riders that were still riding for him, but I was so mad. I just kind of I cut all ties, and so I didn't have a major sponsor to go do the world tour at that point. So yeah, I did. It was a kind of a bit of a more of separation from the sport that I was taking at that point by starting my career in lifeguarding.
Yeah, I mean, did you resent that? Were you bummed out you weren't on the world tour, or were you just over it by then and like, okay, let's turn the page to the next chapter. I now have a career as a lifeguard. Was it like that, or were you like, oh, I wish I was doing the world tour. This is so cool.
No,
How did you feel?
I wished I had done the world tour at least the first 3 or 4 years, but I didn't, and I got very comfortable in my lifeguarding career. And I still went to Hawaii every winter because in California at that point it was a seasonal lifeguard job that I worked 8 or 9 months out of the year. And the other 3 I would go to the North Shore. So I would get pictures, and I was still doing that up until the year 2000. But '96, I remember competing, and I made a few heats, and I got into one heat, which ended up being my last heat, and I can't remember which round it was, but I was pulling big rolls on every wave, big rolls, and the guy who beat me was only doing lateral spins, and I won't mention which rider that was. At that point I was just disgusted with judging, and I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
At that point, I don't even think there was a standard judging course or anything. There was no preparation. It was just judges were picked off the beach. They were, old guys that, they were friends of friends. And it was like, oh, you want to make, $75 today judging and get a free lunch. And it was nothing. They didn't go over the criteria. It was just like, yeah, let's, it's pipeline, And so I was just disgusted. And that was my last pro event, was in 96. I can't remember. I think it was January 96. And I was like, just over it. So I just turned into somebody who ventured to the North Shore every winter to get my photos at Keiki and Waimea Shore Break. And, I still did pretty well. I got some covers of magazines. I still got center spreads. And, I had a good time doing that. There were a couple of at that point, they were making a living off of just chasing the photographers around the North Shore. So I did.
So that was just basically extra money for you because you had a career as a lifeguard in San Clemente here. And so you would go over there, you'd make some photo incentive money for being on covers of magazines, occasionally photos in the mags. You'd still make a little bit of money, which was nice on the side. But did you miss living over here in Hawaii? I mean, it begs the question, you're a lifeguard in California. Why not lifeguard in Hawaii, move back to your homeland?
Well, I actually did think about doing that. It's one of those late years in the late 90s. I talked to Mark Cunningham, who at that point was had promoted and wasn't working at Pipeline anymore. He was working out of the main office on Diamond Head. I talked to Mark Cunningham and I said, hey, I've been working as a lifeguard for 5 years in California. I think I've done pretty well at it. I'm an older guy. I'd love to come home and start lifeguarding here. And Cunningham kind of told me, he goes, you know what, Pat, you'll be working like part-time to start. And, if the captain doesn't like you, you're not going to get a lot of work. And he's kind of hummed and hawed and kind of discouraged me from coming back to Hawaii to become a sitting county lifeguard here in Honolulu. And so I didn't go. And, at that point in 97, I was like the lifeguard of the year at the city of San Clemente. And 2 years after that, I got a permanent job with the state of California as a permanent lifeguard. So, and at that point, I was now in a full-on career.
And you had probably a pension down the track. You were looking at pension. So why rock the boat, right? Why start over when you had a kind of a comfortable thing going on here, a job you enjoyed, and, you could still surf and live by the beach and, be here in California where there's so many things to do. Because I know you like mountains and, all that kind of stuff too, and snow and winter if you wanted it, which you don't get in Hawaii, right? So you sort of assimilated over here.
I did. The first few years were rough, but once I started working and had a steady paycheck, it became very, very comfortable. And like you said, California is a very diversified environment, between the deserts and the redwoods and the high mountain peaks and the forests and I think by the time I moved away in 2012, I'd been on just about every major road in California and the entire coast of California from Mexican border to Oregon.
I'm chuckling, Pat, because it reminds me of our trip to Northern California in 1989 with Lauren Pritchett and Scott Eichner. Did anyone else come with us? Or was it just us four on that trip? I think it was just us four. Maybe Heath Erickson, maybe, I don't know. But that was a classic trip. We had been competing at Ocean Beach in San Francisco, and Hawaii photographer Lauren Pritchett was there because we had planned a road trip from San Francisco to the Oregon border. And as you remember, after the event, we left the next day we drove up to Point Arena and the earthquake hit, the big earthquake that hit San Francisco that year, 1989. And we were in Point Arena, and Lauren wanted to return to take pictures of the destruction. And then she realized that was probably not a good idea. But that was a pretty awesome trip as I remember it. Pretty interesting, beautiful country that we drove through, right?
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, a couple of hidden gems up there, for anybody who likes the cold water. Um, and yeah, just, you know, just fun to explore, and there wasn't a big, in fact, it probably wasn't much of a bodyboarding community at all up in the northern coast of California. And so I don't think we ran into any other boogie boarders, but it was just a lot of fun, and we were just kind of darting around and surfing some fun long waves and beach breaks. And you know,
I,
Scott Eichner going out at a place that I thought he was going to die.
yes, that's right. That reef that was like was that in Shelter Cove? I don't even want to name spots. I don't even know where it was, but
It was
yeah, I
north of,
remember that.
put it that way.
Yeah, none of us, you and I wouldn't paddle out. It was like getting near sunset, as I remember, and we saw this wave, this slab, and he's decided to have a go at it. And I don't know if he caught a wave. He might not have even caught a single wave out there. But another session we had at an unknown rivermouth break, well up the coast. We pulled up and there was a raging current rushing out to sea and like 25-foot waves on the other sides of the river mouth. And we were about to get in our wetsuits, and some local guy pulls up and says, "What are you doing? You're going to get sucked out to sea and die." So we pulled back. And then yet another session at another spot up there, which will remain nameless. We had locals questioning Lauren because she had her camera, and they approached her, and she developed this cover story of being Swedish, and you were her brother, and she was taking pictures of you and your friends, us,
Yeah,
bodyboarding. So
I think it was a German act.
yeah,
She
like
developed.
German. She said she took pictures of nature for Time magazine, but she was off for a week.
Yeah,
So she was going up the coast with us. So we avoided getting in trouble for taking pictures up there. But what
great
a
trip.
trip, man. Yeah, it
Great.
was great. So let's jump back forward here. So now you're done with competing, and now judging comes into the whole thing. I remember you then segued right into being a judge. You said you were disgusted in the judging criteria, not happy with it. So how does the judging come into your life at that point?
Well, it was again, you know, in that fall when the lifeguarding ends, I was in touch, somehow got in touch with Midget Smith and asked if I could join his judging team, and he took me under his wing. And believe it or not, judging and lifeguarding um, have a lot in common, because you have to be able to focus on the water all day long. You can't be distracted. You have to know what you're looking at and distinguish, you know, when to go, when, you know, in lifeguarding. So you have to have a lot of attention focused at the water when judging and in lifeguarding. So Midget took me under his wing, and I started out judging like WSA and whatever NSSA contests up and down the coast, surfing contests, because surfing and bodyboarding, I mean, there's a lot in common. I was a
Mm-hmm.
surfer at that time, and I actually ended up judging a couple of QS surfing events, one in Santa Cruz, and then one at what's that place called? San Miguel Point in Ensenada. I ended
Wow. I
up
didn't know
judging
that.
two QS events, professional surfing, and fit right in with with the panel, and I was a fast learner, luckily, and Midgets just kept me going, and I kind of took a little hiatus. I don't know if you want to segue into it, but when I did become a full-time permanent lifeguard with the state of California, I had to kind of stop doing that at that point. So
Yeah, so now as a full-time permanent lifeguard, you were first assigned to work, I believe, in Carlsbad. Am I right about that?
No, actually, I came out of the State Park Peace Officer Academy and went straight to Lake Paris.
Yeah,
And
so is
I,
this like the pay your dues kind of assignment? Like you're working inland at a lake that has some, shall we say, questionable characters frequenting the premises. Is that a nice way to put it?
yeah, put it lightly. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a beautiful park, and it was a great place to learn law enforcement and learn the state park system. And it when you come out of the academy, you're required to do 2 years in the first um, place where you're assigned. I ended up doing 7 years, but I promoted. So when I promoted, I stayed to get more experience, and then I moved to the San Diego coast, North Sector, which is the parks between Torrey Pines and Carlsbad State Beach,
Oh, got it. Okay.
in 2008, and that's where I
Was
finished my career there.
Did you love moving to the beach from Lake Paris? Were you done with Lake Paris? Because I know you had to draw your weapon a couple times out there. Because you weren't just a lifeguard, you were a lifeguard that could kick ass with a gun, right? So you had law enforcement training as well as part of that gig, right?
Right? Yeah, I was a DUI expert. I was a boating accident reconstruction um, investigator expert. I arrested people for manslaughter, for assault with a deadly weapon. I was assaulted by people we were trying to arrest. I had to draw my weapons. The only time I had to fire my weapon was at um, it was a loose pit bull that was going to about ready to bite my ankle, and I pulled my gun, and um, so I didn't kill the dog, thank goodness, but definitely injured it.
Yeah. Well, it's it
Heavy.
or you. You got to make that call, and yeah, you probably save permanent damage from yourself, of yourself. So yeah, that's heavy, man. And so you stayed on 7 years at Lake Parrish. You got tons of training. Then you moved to the beach. Was it a complete night and day difference?
It was,
Yeah.
yes, it was much more relaxed, more and my supervisory skill was more geared towards supervising the lifeguards and making sure the lifeguard program ran smoothly. I mean, I did all of that plus the law enforcement at Lake Paris, but at the San Diego North Sector, I could kind of relax a little bit and just focus on the lifeguarding. And I did a little bit of law enforcement, but it was mostly just traffic stops
Yeah.
and
It was
stuff
more
like that.
back to your roots. You're at the
It was
beach, ocean lifeguarding. Which is really kind of where you started, and obviously in the city of San Clemente here as a lifeguard, and now you're kind of moving back in that direction. Had you intended to continue on that path, doing that career for more years? Because you said you did that for how many years in the state beaches? How many years did you work there?
uh, just about 4 years.
And had you intended to continue past that 4 years?
Yeah, I wanted to work, until I had at least 20 years in, so I could get um, the full benefits, like
Yeah.
like health insurance and such when I retired. But
So
I
you
didn't
had
get.
Yeah, you had put in 11 years then total, 7 at Paris, 4 at the beach, and you needed another 9 years. So what changed? What happened that you eventually quit that and moved on? Can we touch on that? Or
Yeah,
you
no,
don't want to?
no. Um, it was all because of you, Jay. Actually,
Okay. Okay.
uh,
Let's get into this. I love it. This is the
yeah.
love connection.
So anyway, um, my ex, who JJ, who I dated and was fiance to back in the late '80s, um, in 2008 or no 2009, she she had already separated from her first husband and had gotten divorced, and she knew that I lifeguarded somewhere in California, and I wasn't on social media because I didn't want to be, because I was a law enforcement officer at that time. So she ended up giving you a call, Jay, and asked, "Hey, okay."
Oh, is JJ filling in the holes here in the story?
Yeah.
JJ, you can hop on the camera if you want to.
Jay and I hooked up on Facebook, reacquainted as friends, and then he said, "Hey, by the way, did you know that Pat got divorced?"
That's
yes.
right.
Jay told me, by the way, because Jay always thought we should have stayed together.
Yes, high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
High school.
I had the story a little wrong, but yeah. So you guys hooked up on Facebook, and you had mentioned to her about how you know that Pat is also in the process of being divorced. So JJ and I got back together, and within 3 months we were engaged.
Yes.
And then I think I was engaged and then not quite divorced until about a month before we got married in 2010. And she gave up her career in Washington State, where she was living at that time, to move down to Southern California and be, be with me. And of course we were getting married, and we ended up getting married. Jay just said, I just can't live in this fast-paced Southern California lifestyle. And I kind of, was feeling kind of the same. I was like just kind of burning out, because my job at the state parks was so intensive, so time intensive as well. I was working some days 10, 12, 14, 16-hour days.
Jeez.
And
I got offered my career back.
Yeah, and she got offered her career back in Hawaii, and that was about a year before I turned 50. And in part of CalPERS law enforcement at that time is you could retire at 50, and you receive 3% of your highest year's salary times how many years you worked.
Okay.
And I think all was said and done from the time I entered the academy to the time I quit, plus my service, sick time that added to my years of service, I had a little over 13 years, and you times that times 3%. I earned 39% of my highest year's salary for the rest of my life every month.
All right. Okay.
That's a pretty nice gig.
Yeah.
So I pulled the plug at 50, which is, I was pretty much still in my prime. But it was nice, really nice. And I thank my lucky stars that you were able to help JJ and I reconnect.
The timing was impeccable. Literally, because I knew her ex, because he's from Maryland, my home area. And that's kind of how JJ and I met up on Facebook. And the timing is perfect. She was, her marriage was finishing, yours was finishing. I was like, this is meant to be. These two, it's time to get them back together. So it was perfect. And I'm so glad it worked out.
Thank you, Jay.
Of course, JJ. Of course. So you guys pulled up stakes here in California and said, let's go back to the roots. Let's go back to where we're from. Right?
That's right.
Yes. And that was what year?
That was 2012 when we moved back in July.
And you had all this law enforcement and lifeguard training, and you decided when you got to Hawaii, you would kind of parlay that into looking for a similar type position over there in Hawaii, right?
Right. Yeah. Here. Oh no, I'm on low battery, Jay.
Okay. Sorry. Can you plug it in?
I'll help you.
My charger.
No worries. I'm on a laptop. I probably should have told you at the beginning to flip your phone horizontally, but that's okay. I'm just hoping all this is recording. It says it is. If we get to the end, at the very least, we took a trip down memory lane, even if it didn't record. But yeah, I'm sure it's good.
Yeah, sure it is too.
Yeah. So you guys, you got over back to Hawaii and you started looking for employment, because obviously 36% isn't enough to live in Hawaii, 36% of your prior employment. So you're like, I need to make a little bit more than that.
And I was making money. I had my career back.
Yeah, you were doing interior decoration, right, JJ?
I'm architectural interior design.
Yes.
A little more than decorating. I did all the architectural CAD drawings.
Jeez.
Certified designer.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I needed to supplement it. You know, in Hawaii, it is one of the most expensive places to live in the United States. So, what I did is, well, law enforcement, I applied to become a police officer for Honolulu Police Department, and was about ready to go take the written test. And on the internet, I was emailed a position that was available as an investigator for the Honolulu Police Commission, which was not a law enforcement position, but it was a position that works alongside the department. You work basically 7:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. You get holidays and weekends off, and I don't have to work nights, and it's not dangerous. And so I applied for it and ended up being chosen as the first position chosen to fill. And I've been there now 10 years.
Wow. And so now you've been there 10 years. Is there retirement in your near future from that gig?
Yes. Yes, I will be receiving another pension. I am going to leave the job next year, but I won't receive the pension until I'm 65. So
okay. So you still have 4 more years before that pension kicks in.
Correct.
Yeah. So you'll be 4 years with no income. Well, your 39% pension from the California gig, but you have a plan to move elsewhere. Am I correct on that?
Yep. We've built a house in the northeast corner of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. So we'll be moving there in May 1st of next year.
Wow. And I know JJ's daughter lives over there. Well, in that state, not on the corner of the Olympic Peninsula, but so you'll have some family close by for JJ, and you'll be in the mountains and the cold, so you're not going to miss the ocean.
Oh, I'm sure I'll get involved in the ocean somehow back there. I mean, I've already started to plan how I'm going to get my 5'4" built-in hoodie purchased, and what fins I'm going to use, and what booties, gloves.
Well, so Pat told Jay about you and Ben talking just this last weekend about the surf in Washington while Ben was there.
Yeah, Ben took a trip just last week. He was up in my neck of or where I'm going to be living, and discovered this little slab just up the coast in the straits of Puka. And so he's all excited over it. He was like, yeah, Pat, when I come to visit you, we'll have to go out here and ride this right-hand slab. And I'm just like, okay, sounds good.
It's on. You know, what's ironic too, by the way, Pat, is that for a stint, Mike was living up in the Pacific Northwest, granted down in Oregon, but he had a stint where he was living up there. So you guys are all kind of like getting further away from civilization than the mountains. Yeah. But that's cool. So let's go back. We were talking about the judging, right? So you were judging in the early days, just to back up a little bit, and eventually you started judging on some of the world tour events for bodyboarding, GOB, eventually the IBA, and so forth. Talk about that.
Right. Yeah. I got reconnected even before I retired from the state of California. I was in touch with the IBA and ended up judging. I came back as a judge for the 2011 pipeline event. I think was my first event back as a judge, and it was just like riding a bike. It was just second nature. It was great, and I got a lot of good reports from the head judge that I was doing a good job. And so I started to do some world tour events. I traveled in 2012, I went to Puerto Escondido and to Venezuela to judge those events. And I did pipeline again in 2012, I believe, and 2013 and 2014. I kept doing the pipe events here. And then there was the Hawaii tour that Ben Severson facilitated, along with Science Bodyboards.
Mm-hmm. Norm Skorga.
Yep, to have a tour in Hawaii. And so I became the head judge of that tour, and Ben was the director. And we did, a good 6 or 7 years just of events around the islands, and Kauai, Big Island, and Oahu, and just got right back into it and was having a great time. And then the pandemic hit, and I kind of slowed down a bit. They weren't issuing permits, or I was still a little sketchy of the COVID thing. So it's slowed down a bit. I've done a couple events since then, but I was just right back into it and trying to give back to the sport that I just love so much, and trying to make sure that the right people are getting out of the heat, that the criteria is met, and the person who's meeting the criteria the best is making it out of each heat. And that was my goal, was at the end of the event never to have anybody complain about the way that the judging went. And for the most part, I got a lot of good feedback from the riders and the people involved in the events that we were doing the right thing. And I just, when I was head judging those events, I was in it 110%. I mean, I was like so focused, because I knew what it was like to have a heat go the wrong way so many times in my career. And I would just passionate about getting every heat right, to the point where I wouldn't drink water. I would be standing the whole event, watching every heat, every wave ridden. And that was my goal, was to make sure that the right person's got out of every heat. And
I have to say, Pat, what a gift for those riders that were competing to have you and Ben and Keith and guys like that judging them. There is no way you could say there's anyone possibly that could do a better job than the people who founded the sport, you and your contemporaries over there, and invented most of these maneuvers. I mean, there's no way anybody could question how perfect you guys are as to have judging. I mean, that's, if you had to like handpick who do I want to judge me, you're going to pick the people who pioneered it all, yourself and Keith and Ben and all you guys, man. What a gift for those riders. Amazing.
It's just really fortunate, because I don't think in any other sport you'll see, people like myself and Ben and Keith that became great judges.
Yeah.
Not to Keith and Ben are fantastic, top of the line judges. I mean, top of the line, the best.
Yeah. Yep.
But to have those guys also want to be a part of being on the judging panel. Ben did the world tour judging for years as well before he started the tour here. And try to parallel that in surfing. Who would you have on the right now at the WSL?
I was thinking about that, like PT and Ian Cairns and Sean Thompson, as that would be like having them as judges on the WSL tour. The guys who founded pro surfing judging, but it's never happened.
No, because for one thing, it's really hard work.
Yeah.
For one, and second, it takes a certain type of mind to be able to concentrate at that level.
Yeah.
For that many hours and get it right for the most part. Yeah. I mean, 99.9% of the time. So where else are you going to have that? And that'd be like most surfers and bodyboarders are just like, scramble heads,
Well, it's
And-
insane, Pat. I do some announcing for the IBC tour now. And I go there and some of the events, like particularly not one that I've done, but Antofagasta, that's 10-hour days. And these judges, they sit there, they literally watch every wave ridden the entire day and have to put down a score for every wave. I would never want to do that. So that, like you said, the level of focus and concentration to keep that going for 10 hours and day after day, not just one day, it's just mind blowing. So it takes a special kind of person to do that. And you obviously have that, man. Amazing.
We've been so fortunate to have Ben and Keith and myself to be able to do that here in Hawaii. It takes a certain type of person, maybe an introvert of some kind. I don't know what kind of person it is. I know who they are when I see them. And I can't tell you how many judges I've gone through in Hawaii to find, the best guys that have worked under me. And we've had a pretty good crew. So it's been a good run.
Stay tuned for the third and final part of my interview with bodyboarding legend, Pat Caldwell. Thanks for watching and listening to The Real Deal Show. See you in the surf.